Okay, so I'm going to start this video. Not really up for it. Only because of the gang stalking behavior within certain groups of individuals that elevate themselves through violence. Whether it's passive aggressive or straight out aggressive, it doesn't matter. I'm just saying. So, what's the date? Well, it's the 17th of March, 2026, at almost 4 a.m. in the morning. I'm going to talk about UNDRIP a little bit in this video, which is the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People. I want to talk about that and how it relates to quote-unquote Canada, with BC being a major instrument into the implementation of, I suppose, legislation that is disrupting, well, currently thousands of lives. It's going into the thousands, tens of thousands, if you want to include Kamloops, to which there's been a claim by the indigenous people of Kamloops to claim the whole city in regards to whatever politics that they're using to their advantage. What they hope to gain from it, I'm not too sure yet. I don't think anybody really knows. It will probably lean more towards an added tax to pay a oh my lord, reparation, no, you know, restitution, outside of taking people's properties that they've owned for years and 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 years, or are just buying as, you know, first-time homeowners, and right, where they have no actual rights to the property because somewhere along the line foreign interests have created a situation where they've put a lot of eggs into the one basket with the indigenous people to take on the role of quote-unquote government to pay back whatever it is that these people want in terms of how they feel that they were shortchanged from way back in the day before the first so-and-so stepped on to Canada. I'm just saying. I've heard where people are laying claim, indigenous people are laying claim to land within British Columbia, Canada, because their ancestors, right, picked blackberries, quote unquote, along the Fraser River. So therefore, because their ancestors were picking blackberries along the Fraser River in this particular geographical area, somehow they feel that they own that property today, even though that property, you know, through time has changed many hands and is owned by somebody else who has been paying taxes for 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, however, and are now being told that they don't own that property. And if they do, well, it's up for debate. So I just kind of want to keep that on the forefront because that disrupts lives, millions, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands. We got baby in the house right now. Baby's in the house because she's been freezing.
Cat's arguing now.
Well, that's probably Lily.
Hi, baby.
All right, or maybe it's Baby. Baby is that stray cat. We think she's pregnant. And we're feeling sorry for the kittens, and we're kind of feeling sorry for her because she's just been loitering in the yard, right? And it's been very cold, eh? And I have a lot of raccoons, and raccoons like to eat cats if they can get a hold of them, right? It
Now
depends.
Lily is starting to fight with her.
It depends on the circumstances. Socially, they can eat together, but if they come into contact with each other outside in the dark,
Except for Mickey.
yeah, I'm talking about raccoons though, and they're on the hunt for food, they will attack cats. Anyway, okay, so that's not what we're talking about. So if you hear, that's just because baby's in the house and we're just trying to let her warm up for a while, and just we're trying to figure out whether she's actually pregnant or not. We really do think she's pregnant, and we're afraid she's gonna have the kittens on the porch or something dumb like that, and or wherever. So anyway, okay, so we're gonna put UNDRIP. I know I'm talking, please. The UN Declaration of Rights of Indigenous People in the mix in regards to this video, which, you know, people, honestly, whatever I do and whatever I say and however it all gets put together, I don't see it as content because, you know, to me that's insulting because of the foundation. Right? No foundation. I honestly, I don't think I would have done videos. What would have been the point? And where people who do videos and rely on monetization for videos, like rely on videos for monetization to either have an income or to supplement their incomes, or just do it for quote unquote clout chasing. You know, that's them. That's not me. Me, it's always been tell the story. Whatever that story, I am just the messenger to the short-term story in terms of video to video to video. Whether you want to call it content or not, that's your business. I don't see it as content. I see it as a form of community activism that tells the other side of the story, where people like to bury it, sweep it under the rug, act like it doesn't exist, trivialize it, will victimize victims twice. And that's because I'm a community activist, not fighting to keep the rich, wealthy, fat, and gluttonous, and I suppose solely prosperous to where nobody else can prosper except them. That's not my mission. Okay? That's their mission. That's what the wealthy do for themselves. How they do it, whether they do it through organized religion, whether they do it through criminal activity, whether they do it through politics, whether they do it through a form of being a psychopath, through that addiction where it's equal to being addicted to cocaine, right? You don't get the cocaine, you drop. You don't get the money, you drop. You get the money, you get the high. You get the cocaine, you get the high, right? And that's what fuels the addiction, right? The up and down, up and down. So, you know, you know, in my last video, right? My son started ragging on me. Well, you know, first of all, that's nothing new. It doesn't matter what I do, what I say, how I want to do it, how old I am, what my experiences are, what I've done for him, right? It doesn't matter. He's always got something to bitch and complain about and to insult me over, because ultimately he's a narcissist. I guess that's what you call those kind of people. Or, you know, he is inadequate in his own ways, where he's got to blame somebody, preferably his mother, because I'm easy to blame, and then take all his displaced anger and frustration out on me to try and control me, because ultimately he's a control freak, to which he is not the only one that's a control freak on this planet. There's lots of them, okay? And I'm just an easy target for him. And obviously the older I get, the easier it is to abuse me, whether verbally, psychologically, right? Which ultimately ends up being very stressful for me. Okay. And then it becomes physical because, you know, my brain is on overdrive dealing with a problem that technically I should just cut loose. But then we're codependent because I'm the mother, he's the son, and with me, with my eyes, basically, puts me in a situation where I'm more vulnerable and easier to take advantage of. Human nature. Anyway, I tell Andre like this, the ones that really helped me, were willing to work with me, yada was Shimei and his mom, and of course Uncle John. Brooks, on his own, can't be bothered, whatever. Marcane, on his own now, really can't be bothered. And if he is bothered, you know, he lets me know about it and thinks he should take control of everything because blah, 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 which is wrong. And then, of course, there's Tisha, who, you know, and really it does. It all stems down, for those two, Tisha and Marcane, it stems down to money. If they had less money and had to go through the things that I went through, then maybe they'd be more humble and not so wasteful. But as it is, you know, either or, it doesn't really matter. So when we went to that funeral with him starting with his yappity yap yap, that's not unusual because he would have found something else that day to start crabbing on me about. It wouldn't have mattered. I'm surprised he didn't complain about my freaking hat and my jacket. Right? You know, I asked him if we could just stop off at a little Punjabi grocery store on the way home. He knows I have no car. He knows I can't get out and go shopping. It was on the way home. It's right on 120. It's just let me run in, grab some yogurt, grab some cottage cheese, grab some milk, just a few little vegetables, nothing much. I wouldn't have been in there no more than 15 minutes. I didn't want to hang around. I just needed the help. And no, I don't want to, Mom. You know, it's Sunday and I want to relax. Yeah, okay. Well, there you go. There you go, right? Do you think he'd come here and offer to take me to a grocery store? No. No, so, you know, like, I just take that shit with a grain of salt because, you know, the things I was telling him about, like, when it, you know, like, you know, you need to prepare for this, right? I'm doing what I'm going to do until I can't do anymore. I tell myself that every day, people. And as I'm going through the books, for example, right now, right? You know, they're heavy, right? But other people want me to beat myself up over it. Because, you know, for their own ulterior reasons, right? This will probably be a long video. Whether you want to listen to it or not, it doesn't really matter to me. Because I ain't making a whole lot of money off of this shit, if anything. I'll never see a dime from YouTube as far as I'm concerned. Been doing this far too long to be depending on YouTube basically for anything outside us to document the bullshit, really. When it comes down to being a community activist and you take it serious, be that warrior, right? You know, stand up for your community. I'm sorry, I didn't stand up just for the Catholics. I didn't stand up just for the quote-unquote Christians. I didn't stand up just for the Muslims. And I sure the hell didn't just stand up for the Punjabis or anybody else with their religious glitches. Clicks. They're not glitches. I didn't choose a particular religious clique and said that's what I was going to stand up for as a community activist when I made the decision to put myself out there for all the right reasons in Canada because I believed in the country to be a world leader for prosperity for all. Okay, that's my core principles, which has nothing to do with quote-unquote content on YouTube or anywhere else for that matter. If you want to take it to Facebook and TikTok and Rumble and those kind of places, right? I don't have time to sit there and write everything that goes on in my life. So I do the video, I put the video up, it is what it is. A lot of people, they don't like it because it shows too much confidence. That's basically what it is. That's what my son can't stand about me. Even at this age, I'm still confident. And the more he can break my spirit and control me, the better he feels about himself. And what he hopes to gain from it, well, sooner or later, whatever it will be, will dwindle away, and he'll be having to stand on his own 2 feet, and he'll just probably move on to somebody else with that kind of attitude as to how he treats me sometimes, right? So in the meantime, kind of distracted away from what I was trying to say. So in the meantime, the video, okay, with the funeral with Mr. Gill, you know, I didn't know what to expect at a Punjabi funeral, first of all, in terms of, like, when we were Googling the location, it advertised it had 2 rooms, one for 200 and one, well, I don't know, maybe it had more than two rooms in there, but a family could, I guess, rent 2 rooms, one for something to, I don't know, they had it listed as 2 different things. Anyway, one was to fit 200 people, and the other one was to fit 300 people. But I think you could interchange them to do different things within the one group. Or, on that day, there was 2 funerals. There was Mr. Gill, a man, and then there was somebody else that was Punjabi who died, but who happened to be a woman. And Andre was just telling me that, I guess he heard, right? She died from heart problems and blood clots. That's basically what Mr. Gill was suffering from. And that's what Mrs. Gill suffers from. That's why she had open heart surgery. And I just simply said to Andre, now this is where I have to be careful because it's YouTube, right? Well, that's because a lot of Punjabis in 2020 did what the government told them to do and took an experimental inoculation that well, it's already being proven that it wasn't as effective as people were led to believe. That's not what this is about, but I wasn't surprised to hear that, though, considering what happened in the past. That's what I'm trying to say. Right? So, there was a man and a woman in that building who had died from the Punjabi community. So, when we were leaving, I didn't know it was a woman who had died. Or actually, yeah, I did, because I was hearing somebody saying she. So in my title with Mr. Gill's funeral, a man and a woman walk in their own shoes, right? I included the woman because in the next room over was a woman who died, who happened to be Punjabi. And while I was in the funeral with the, people talking, right, inside, and I mean, some of them were talking in Punjabi, so obviously I didn't understand what they were saying, right? But some of them were his granddaughters and stuff, right? Were talking, and maybe a grandson or something, I'm not sure. Anyway, there was a few people that were talking in English, and they were saying how Mr. Gill wrote poetry. Poetry. I didn't know that. I didn't know he wrote poetry. I could understand, though, why he'd write poetry, though, because as he was aging and his heart was, giving him lots of problems, right? His doctor told him to do nothing for a year and to keep his activity level very, very low. So he basically, I remember him telling me, he basically locked himself in his room for the most part, like stayed a lot of time in his room and just kind of disconnected from everything, right, outside of the basics within his family unit, and kept very quiet. And I guess that's when he really went in for a writing spurt, okay? So, and I'm like, okay, so he's a poet. I wonder what kind of philosophy that he tried to write into his poetry, considering all the things that he has said to me over the 15 years that I've known him, okay? Because I've talked to him on several different occasions over a period of 15 years, getting his perspective on whatever it was that we were talking about at that time. And he was a little bit of a quote-unquote rebel, right? That's why he liked his orange turbans, because, he was a more open-minded to sharing wealth, I guess you could say, to one degree or another, right? Where not everybody was flushed out onto the streets so that some could prosper compared to the expectations, the hold of the temple on the individual. He didn't like that. That's why in his last conversation with me, he told me he wasn't going to the temple. He was trying to bring that superpower to the table and encourage others, including himself, to see people as individuals versus classifying them under a caste system or through religious doctrines, so that you pit one against the other. Well, we're Punjabis, we're better than the Muslims. We're Punjabis, we're better than the Christians. We're Christians, we're better than the Punjabis. You know what I mean? Right? So what I'm trying to say is, when they said he was a poet, I'm like, okay. Well, in that case, I can understand why you were a bit of a rebel in regards to the way you talked to me. However, he was, in my opinion, passive-aggressive. So he had a strong belief, right, that all people were equal, blah, 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 blah. But then on the other hand, he had the larger collective within his religion that basically kept him in check, right? And made him do things their way versus him wanting to do it his way. So that's why I think he pulled back from the temple, because I don't think he was lying to me per se. I don't think he ever left the temple, because when the funeral, that part of the funeral was done and everybody was leaving, I caught up with Mrs. Gill. She cried and everything. I told her, you need to find some happiness, just connect with your grandkids, Mrs. Gill. Don't let the sorrow of losing Mr. Gill destroy you, right? And she's so tiny. She got so tiny, and, you need to find some happiness. And then she just said, we're going to the temple now. And I'm like, well, there you go, Mr. Gill. You didn't get very far away from that temple because they all dragged your ass right back to that temple. Maybe you hadn't been there for a little while because you were hiding out at the house writing freaking poetry. But at the end of the day, everybody made sure you went back to that temple and they kept you in with the collective, whether you wanted to be there or not. Okay, this is how I'm thinking. Okay? And because I think differently than other people, because I'm not with the collective, clearly some of my, I'm on this last video with Mr. Gill's funeral, I'm getting some of these coming in, right? Because, they got their idea of whatever it is that they think is acceptable, but they don't walk in my shoes. They don't walk in Mr. Gill's shoes. They don't walk on that woman in the other room with her funeral, right? And they don't walk in her shoes. All I know is that both of them died from heart problems and blood clots. I don't know how old the other woman was when she died. The point is there's an issue there because Mrs. Gill has that issue too. And, either or. So, I'm like, in my mind, I'm like, okay, Mr. Gill, well, they took your ass back to the temple there and you didn't break away as much as you thought you did. But on the other hand, you're a poet and you wrote something. I don't know what you wrote. Will it ever be, was it written in Punjabi or was it written in English? Are they ever going to publish it? Publish it, right? Like allow other people to read it. Or if they do publish it, are they going to translate it to English and make copies available to people like me who cannot read Punjabi? And because it'd be kind of interesting to see where his mindset was at in regards to his higher philosophy with that quote-unquote superpower. Did he write the word superpower in his poetry? And if he did, how does that affect the temple when the temple itself, as a collective, is a closed community? It's like a community, it's like a gated community, people. Right? And Mr. Gill didn't want to be gated in. Whether his community, whether the temple, whether the family, whether his friends, whoever wanted him to be gated, to be locked in within his own doctrine, religious beliefs, and nothing more and nothing less. He didn't want to be there like that. So if he refused to go to the temple in his last few years, not saying he never went, because I'm sure he did, he had to. He had to save face. He had to save face, because if he didn't save face by going at some point, he would have been ostracized. He would have been expelled. Right? He would have lost opportunity and quote-unquote business deals and all that crap. But he was more like a free bird. Right? So, he was passive-aggressive. He rebelled, but not to the point where it drew a lot of negative attention on him so that people could justify start abusing him because he didn't do it their way, because he wanted to do it his way. Well, that's kind of like how my videos are, whether from the very beginning, right? People come, they watch my video, all of a sudden they think they have a right to tell me how I should make my video. I should do this, I should do that, I should, whatever. No, if you want, you can do a video response. And then, if I think I want to do a video response back, I'll do it, or I will adjust whatever it is that you're saying that I need to adjust. Outside of that, we're all individuals and we all walk on our own shoes. So, when it relates to Mr. Gill's poetry, I hope at some point that they publish whatever it was that he wrote, because they kept talking about it, right? Because I think there is a bigger message in what he wrote outside of what you might read for face value. Just in light of his rebellion against being a Borg to the collective versus being an individual to the larger collective. Right? Whether people agree with me or not, you know, it is what it is. So, I hope this doesn't freeze, but I found a way to correct that problem if it does. And then I want to talk about, that's the introduction, okay? I didn't ask Mr. Gill to die at this particular point in time. He warned me, though. He told me 6 weeks. From the time I last talked to him, he said about 6 weeks. He mentioned it in passing when we were talking downstairs before we came upstairs. Yeah. And I kind of did the math on it, and it pretty much was at the 6 week mark. So he knew, right? And I guess when he was dying at some point, probably in the hospital, he called. He wanted me to come see him, but nobody called me and had me go see him. That's what I was told. He wanted to talk to me. But he's already talked to me. Plenty of times. Thing is, I don't know how much his family respects that, though. You see, that's the thing. Because there's other issues that have never been dealt with. Mr. Gill tried to deal with them, but my question is, are they going to respect his words? They respect his poetry, but are they going to respect his words? And is Mr. Gill going to just end up being another Uncle John, where everything he owns, whether physical or intellectual, is robbed from him? I was downstairs yesterday, because we're in the new day now, working downstairs. And the first thing that came out of my mouth, once I started thinking about the ghosts in the house, I'm like, okay, Mr. Gill, now you're down here with me. So I've got you down here now with me, right? Because you know he's there. Right? My last conversation with him was downstairs, so of course he'd be there. And then, of course, we've got Uncle John, we've got Shemay, and we've got Sierra. So I've got 4 ghosts downstairs with me now, keeping me company when I'm down there working. And that's just a fact. Yeah. So, and I'm like, but the fight isn't over yet, Mr. Gill. In my head, as I'm working. Clearly, yeah, driving up to that funeral home, which looks more like a college institution of some sorts in terms of facilities, you know, big building and right, halls, the echo, right, like right, right, you know what I mean? It's not your standard funeral home, that's for sure. But for the collective, it makes sense, right? It works for them. Maybe not for the person that's being buried or cremated. I don't know if they cremate their dead, but Mr. Gill obviously was going to be buried, right? Because he was, well, I don't know, that's not true. You can be cremated. I mean, you can be embalmed and then still be cremated. I don't know if he got cremated or buried. Either or, you know, to me, what it did is just reinforced the disparity within our community, where at some point through Mr. Gill's, we'll just say he was 86 years old, because he was about that old, right? In his 86 years of traveling, whether in a physical sense or in an astro sense, being that he was a poet, I'm just saying, you know, he did what he could do, I suppose, more on an individual level to help people have some form of normality in their life as the world rushed by and put more and more people at risk to that caste system where they get locked into poverty and end up being trafficked and yada, yada, yada. Because in India, he was helping a family in India who, I guess, rented land or something from him that he owned out there, and that's why he went every year. He had to do paperwork, right? And, you know, they didn't want him to sell because they'd have no place to go, and kind of like me, right? So he had two of us. He had me here at this house with no place to go once I'm out, and based on the politics that have led up to thousands and thousands and thousands of people being disenfranchised from housing in general, right? And are ending up homeless and yada yada. Well, he had that same issue in India because he told me, right? So for him, that was his form of community activism where he was giving back. Or at least holding back the wolves. Because he told me he was holding back the wolves. Holding back the family. He didn't call them wolves. I call them wolves. Because it stressed him out so much where he had to argue with them to just stop whatever it was that was putting my family at risk, so that that wealth building process could continue uninterrupted without being held to account to the destruction that it creates in its wake, right? If you're going to dig for gold, bring in the big machines, rip up the land, exploit the people to do it, to do the work, poison the water, get rich off the gold, and leave everybody poisoned and homeless and broke, and the land is destroyed after you're done digging up the gold and you leave. I mean, come on. It's the same kind of situation in terms of what's going on in Canada right now. But where UNDRIP comes in is, for as much as they're wealth building, establishing this and establishing that as a collective group that keeps their thumb on the individuals, right? Strength in numbers, right? You know, they're all at risk to losing whatever it is that they think they own. And if they don't lose it, they might have to end up paying a surtax just to keep what they think they have, which could be flipped at any other point in the future under different legislation that can be easily rewritten, while the old legislation is redacted, right? And a lot of these people that are quote-unquote wealthy or semi-wealthy or on the verge of becoming wealthy based on property, land property, basically, they might get a rude awakening. I wonder if Mr. Gill wrote anything about that in his poetry. I'm just saying. Because there's different kinds of wars going on in Canada. And being that Mr. Gill was a warrior, you know, I bring these wars to the table because they're already there on the table, with or without him, right? And when it comes to me, right? I talk about homelessness, I talk about this, talk about whatever. Okay, so I kind of have a headache here. So there's this one video that I kind of wanted to do. This was a long interview. I'm sorry. It was a long introduction to this one particular video that was done on the downtown east side. We go from the wealth to one of the more wealthiest groups of individuals in British Columbia, Canada, who happen to be Punjabi, which is a separatist group to India, although they're highly connected to India, right? Compared to what's going on out on the streets, whether in Surrey, Richmond, Coquitlam, Burnaby, Abbotsford, places like that, even into the interior with the small towns, yada yada. But in this situation, they're talking about what's happening in the downtown east side in regards to children being trafficked, people being kidnapped off the streets, yada yada, and how our quote-unquote government and public union sector employees on average, including Royal Canadian Mounted Police, yada yada, are doing nothing to stop it. Okay. To which brings me back to my channel, my story, my family, my struggle, and those around me that struggle with these issues, because I'm not the only one struggling with these issues. I just happen to talk about these issues, whether I'm diplomatic about it or not. Regardless, at least I'm wearing that orange turban that can go blue. I stand for my community. I stand for the province of British Columbia, Canada. Through the trademark, I stand for the country of Canada. I didn't just choose one particular little fight under a roof called a temple. I chose the whole landscape, with the pockets of this and the pockets of that, and the birds of the feather flock over there, the birds of the feather flock over there, and then there's another flock over there, well, over there, down there, and yonders is another flock. I didn't pick and choose my flock, right? So people can't get mad at me for that, but they like to get mad at me, because if they get mad at me, then they think they can control me. And then they justify hurting me. Yeah. I'm just saying. So in this video, it just makes me think, well, of my dead daughters. Obviously, Sierra is a key role on this issue, with the cover-up of Shimei's murder for the intent to harvest organs illegally, to which is real in British Columbia, Canada, to which people are in denial, whether through purposeful ignorance and just don't want to deal with it, hoping it won't happen to them and their loved ones, or they are directly involved in one way or another, or at least have knowledge that it's happening, so that if they want to tap into it and they need a heart, they need a kidney, they need lungs, they need eyes, whatever it is, they can get it, right? When they need it, because they know it's available. But yet they don't stand up and fight against it, right? Because there's that undercurrent of corruption that travels through organized religion, that allows prosperity, that gold digging, polluting the land, killing off the people as you're making them sick so they can dig and do whatever they do in these developing countries where they use the people to rape the land and pollute the waters and pollute the land. And once they get whatever resource they want, plutonium, gold, whatever it is, uranium, doesn't matter. Once they get what they want and there's nothing left to get from the land, they just leave the people what's left of them, because a lot of them have already died or on the verge of dying from having their bodies so polluted because of their work and what they, the landscape is like and what the water is like. Those corporations, when they leave, they don't look back, they don't care. Well, that's kind of what's going on here in Canada, in my opinion. Whatever's going on right now, and that's why I said in that video, I went for Mr. Gill, obviously, but at the same time, I am who I am what I am, and just like Mr. Gill is a poet, he is who he is what he was, and I'm curious to know if they're going to allow his voice to trickle out to the larger community, to where maybe they bring his poetry to the forefront and allow people to read it, to really see where his mind was at when it came to that quote-unquote hour versus the collective, where you have one and it goes like that and it just merges into one big glob of nothing else, where it can't be penetrated, right? So basically nothing changes. If you can't penetrate something because it's so glued together through doctrine, which is religious beliefs and those kind of things, right? And you can't penetrate it, but there's something in there that's festering and isn't as quote-unquote holy or I need some Tylenol, or righteous, but you can't penetrate it. How do you expect it to change? It won't. And your life is just living for the moment. It means nothing if you have no desire to change it, because you're happy with the corruption that keeps it glued together. Somehow Mr. Gill found a way to separate himself from that. And versus holding Mr. Gill to account of that, they want to attack me for bringing that to the surface and reminding people that he was an individual. He did walk in his own shoes, just like that woman in the next room to him who had died walked in her own shoes. We don't know what her story is. We don't know what her talents were. But in regards to being individuals, they have a right to be acknowledged as individuals. So I acknowledge Mr. Gill as an individual. Yeah. They called him a king when they were talking, because he affected a lot of people's lives over the years. Yada yada. Well, like I said, it would be interesting to see what he wrote. And instead of maybe seeing it as quote-unquote poetry, you might end up discovering or noticing or realizing or coming to the conclusion of that there might even be some philosophy in there. a deeper meaning. So I'm glad I went for all the hoofla around it, whether it came from my son or whatever or whoever, right? Because Mr. Gill was a warrior. It's just he had more checks and balances than I have. So let me come back. Okay, so we're going to carry on. Now, this is my video at the funeral. Alright? Mr. Gill's funeral. Every man and woman walks in their own shoes. Alright? Now, the question is, in my mind, was Mr. Gill, well, we know he was a poet. So what was the purpose of his writing? Was he just putting words together to make them rhyme so he could maybe end up being a rapper? I'm just saying. Or was he a visionary? You know? Me, I'm more like a visionary. I look years ahead after I'm dead in terms of what I'd like to see for the collective society, without gated communities under doctrine, being controlled under doctrine via through religion, various different types, yada yada. Was Mr. Gill a visionary through his poetry? Or was he maybe an Edgar Cayce who had predictions in regards to, you read his poetry, was he predicting something in the future via through astral traveling, or yada ya? Or was he a simple man that just wanted to give others a sense of maybe living well, right? You know, the art of living. You know, was his poetry more designed around the art of living in regards to managing stress, right? Interacting with individuals and just yada yada, finding pleasure in the smaller things in life, right? You know, family and maybe not so much money. Like where was his center point at? So with that said, I want you to hear, I don't want to call it a kahuffle, but it's like a kahuffle. When this was done, after the funeral inside was done, and everybody was done talking and whatever. Now I did put this part of my hand on Mr. Gill's face, and I held it there for a little while, right? Because that's what my family members, my aunts and uncles, mostly my uncles, did when my grandfather died, when my mother died, when my grandmother died. They actually touched their bodies that were embalmed in caskets. And when Shimei was in the hospital, I only touched her that one time, people, with those rubber gloves on, but I could feel her body as hard as a rock for the part that I touched. And I knew she had been embalmed. I could tell. The moment I seen her, I could tell. It was one big cover-up. So when I touched Mr. Gill, he was extremely cold. I knew to expect that. And he was his skin was extremely hard, which would be understandable. And the only thing that I got from that was I regret not having the courage to manhandle Shimei's body on that hospital bed for 9 days and being very proactive to the point where I could have openly exposed what they did to her body while they had it, versus falling for the old okie dokie and putting on those rubber gloves, and was told that she had a super bug and not to do the right, don't take pictures, don't, to hell with that. No, I should have moved her body, I should have flipped her over, I should have hugged her, I should have put my arms around her, I should have examined her body, I should have done all those things when I had that chance. And if I would have done that, I would have been able to expose 100% point blank that her body was dead and it was embalmed on that hospital bed. Okay? What?
Baby's over here now.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay. We're just giving her time to warm up for a little while. So, Mr. Gill helped me to cross that threshold where I wasn't afraid. And it wasn't that I was afraid, but, through the death of my daughters, like even Sierra, I didn't touch her body when she was in that body bag and I was in that funeral home, and I had, I recorded that. I just never uploaded it because she was naked in that body bag. I'd have to shade out her private areas in order to make it, I guess, YouTube friendly to the point. And even then, they'd probably make it adult restricted, right? Either or, I put my hand on his cheek, that part of my hand in there. I held it there for a minute or so, and was on the other side with him, I guess you could say. So after this was done in here and everybody was done doing whatever they were doing, and they all started to come out, you could hear the kahuffle, the beehive kahuffle, the beehive shuffle. So let's just listen. People are still coming in. Okay, so now what I want to do is I want to put it on slow speed. I do. I already listened to it once on slow speed, but I want you to hear it. Okay. Very high intensity. Now keep in mind, from my understanding, the Punjabi religion, quote unquote, doesn't necessarily believe in a God, as in defined in a dictionary, I suppose. Never mind an afterlife. It's more like you live your life, try and be humble, be quote unquote charitable where you can, stay out of trouble, be prosperous as best as you can, because when you die, that's it. There's nothing left. You're gone, and you really don't go anywhere after the fact. You're dead. Where, for me, the confusion comes in with the funeral and how the people perceive the dead person to still have a quote-unquote living soul that's moved on, that deserves recognition and blessings from the collective, I suppose, to be safe on the other side. Which is kind of contrary to what in our world, in our realm, says when it regards to this religion, where you die, that's it. There is no afterlife. You don't get to come back. You don't get to be reincarnated. Yada da. It's a one-time deal, and it is what it is. So while you're here, get your groove on, get as much as you can, live as best as you can, try and be charitable where you can, but put yourself and your family first before everybody else, because, you know, yada yada, look after your home before you look after somebody else, yada yada. And then after that, don't worry about it, whether you were good or bad, whether you committed crimes in the middle of all that while you were alive, doesn't matter, because once you're dead, you're dead, as long as you got to live a life that was quote unquote fairly decent. So for me, that's a bit of a, it's like contradicting in regards to what I witnessed at the funeral, because my sense, while standing in that room, going through the motions of their rituals and how they get on with the passing of somebody's soul, I would think. I had a strong sense that they were paying, I guess you could say, homage to the soul of Mr. Gill versus to the body, to which contradicts whatever it is that's they're being educated, in my mind, in their temples, where they're being told on one hand, live, do this, die, forget about an afterlife, forget about ever coming back, that's it, you're dead, you're gone, you don't matter no more, right? And then, but yet when they die, I don't know. It's like the expectation I was feeling, I suppose, or sensing or something, was more. They wanted more. They expected more. They were hopeful for more. They wanted Mr. Gill to have a soul that went somewhere else. I didn't get the feel that they were wanting him to just be a nobody and a nothing outside of maybe his poetry. And even then, we don't even know if they're going to make his poetry available to outsiders. Right? In other words, somebody who's not Punjabi. Where, you know, if I wanted to access his poetry, to analyze it for myself, to gain insight, whatever my reasons are they going to make it available, or are they going to hide it and keep it segregated from the greater collective? Because maybe there's something in there that he wrote that was contradictory to that quote-unquote superpower compared to what the temple itself is teaching. So I'm curious to know, was he more of a visionary in terms of wanting good for the community and bring all communities together, not just a segregated community for wealth building purposes and nothing more and nothing less, or like a humanitarian where he wanted to bring all communities together. That's why I put that Hamas, or not Hamas, whatever, that in the link. I came across that video where the Strait of Hormuz shut down. The Iran war just triggered global food crises, not just oil, which is right at the top of the news right now, where this strait interrupts our fertilizer deliveries right across the globe, almost 50%, with a lot of that fertilizer going to India. But if it's being interrupted, even the Indian farmers in India won't be able to plant their crops like they should be in order to keep up with their population's needs, as well as anywhere else these fertilizers are shipped off to, which could be very problematic for billions of people, right? As well as oil prices will probably go up, to which they are slowly but surely creeping up, to which Canada is not insulated from the disruptions that this could cause on a global level. And if I was a Punjabi who was a warrior, I think that would be one of the top things on the top of my list when it came to being prepared for that type of quote-unquote war, whether it's being directly put at me in terms of, fighting in the fields, or whether it's doing commerce in British Columbia, Canada, whether as a farmer needing fertilizer or purchasing products from India like rice, but the rice is not available because the farmers in India can't plant because they don't have the fertilizer, because we don't know how long this is going to drag out for. And I would think that would be a fight that Mr. Gill would be interested in, right? Being that, it's politics and it's concerns quote-unquote humanity, not just a small core of people, but all people, rich or poor, which would be, in my opinion, up Mr. Gill's alley. From the man that I know of. Not what they know of, but what I know of. How he interacted with them and how he interacted with me are different to one degree or another, right? He got pressures from them, and I suppose you could say he got pressure from me for being codependent in terms of, the house. This stupid rat is back, and it's a big one because it's been thumping. It's been jumping, and whoomp, I can hear it thumping up there. God forbid if it's pregnant and it has babies up there. It's probably one of those big-ass long ones. The field rat, that's what I'm thinking it is. It's back. I keep asking my son. He said he's going to buy a stepladder. I keep asking him to buy, did you get the stepladder? Did you get, because, it's driving me nuts and it's scaring me, right? And I don't even know if he's going to be able to do anything about it, even if he gets the stepladder. Anyway, so we're just going to listen to this for a little while longer. Now, this is at 25% of the normal speed, which is extremely fast. Extremely fast in terms of energy. to put it back on normal speed and just finish listening to it. And the reason I'm doing this is to remind people that they, it's like your eyes. Just because you see something with your eyes doesn't mean that what you see is exact when it comes to quote-unquote face value, because there's other realms around us that we don't see. Well, it's the same thing with hearing. You see, my confusion comes in if you don't believe in a quote-unquote God as a collective, and you want everybody in that collective to believe the same thing, and if they don't, they will get ostracized if they don't believe in what the collective believes in, or if they don't follow the rules of the collective, they will get expelled. Right? But it doesn't mean that they're bad people or less of anything that the doctrine teaches them. If anything, they're more of the warrior that the ones that profess to be warriors are really not. You're either a warrior or you're not. There's really no middle line in there. Right? You stand for something or you don't. There's either an afterlife or there isn't. There's either a soul and it moves on and it visits people like me in the basement with the rest of my family members who are no longer here, or there isn't a soul and it doesn't move on. Right? My consensus on what I experienced was everybody wanted to believe that there was a soul in Mr. Gill who moved on to that quote-unquote superpower, whatever that superpower is to him, but he just didn't disappear and became no more, which is contrary to what is being taught in their temple. Collectively, that is. Everybody's got... Okay. So now, we're going to talk about the downtown east side, where the poorest of the poor, regardless of their religion, ethnic heritage, are facing homelessness in large numbers, as those numbers are increasing all across the province, as well as Canada. And instead of things getting quote-unquote better, they're getting worse, with heinous crimes either being ignored by our government, which would be nothing new, in my opinion, based on my experiences with my family and what I've seen around me happen to other people locally. Pastor Granny, Debbie, that guy that had that house, Debbie's house after Debbie died, mysteriously. And then That house ended up having it being swarmed with SWAT, federal SWAT, where I personally feel he was kidnapped by super soldiers that took him off to do something with his body, simply because of the type of vehicle that rolled up and just the shenanigans that were going around it that the camera captured. What happened to Sierra, what happened to Shmei, what happened to Andre, well, what happened to Amari for sure, what happened to Uncle John, yeah, you know, while the ones that are prospering are ignoring all of those types of situations, regardless of where it's happening, whether it's happening with me and my family or somebody else's family, under that quote-unquote caste system. As they victimize the victims twice, perhaps be passive-aggressive with that quote-unquote community activism under their doctrine, where they're supposed to help the collective, the greater, not just the one gated collective, but the greater community through quote-unquote charitable acts when they can. But at the same time, there's no disputing it. There's wealth disparities that are fueling the underground economy and putting tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of lives at risk to harm, injury, and an early death, so that those gated communities can continue to exist and spread out for only one purpose, and that would be for themselves. I wonder if Mr. Gill talked about that in his poetry. Being that that's a sensitive subject and people don't like to talk about that stuff because it takes away from good business. It calls out good business to be bad business when it's actually bad business. It brings people to the table where they have to be held to account for the shenanigans that they perpetrate through the acts of acting dumb, pretending that they don't understand what's going on, convincing themselves that they're not obligated to be a part of the solution versus being a part of the problem, and then say that they're not the problem, that they have no problems. And if they do have problems, their problems stem from other people's problems, which makes them resentful, which ultimately corrupts them even more, because they've got somebody else to blame to justify their own bad behavior, right? Yeah. Hold on a minute. Okay, so, I don't know. This video was supposed to be a video response to this video, but based on 64 years of living and where we're at today and what the wars are within our own country and outside of our country, and considering what shoes I walk in, I just feel it's important to keep this in the forefront, whether people like it or not, because this situation affects tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, and millions of lives all across Canada, being that I live in Canada. So the title of this is...
Really? Okay.
Yeah. The title of this video is I interviewed a woman who says children are being trafficked out of the downtown east side right now. It's not a very long video. And I'm wondering if Mr. Gill talked about this kind of stuff in his poetry. Was his poetry written just to smooth things over and to cover up the dust, sweep it under the rug? Or was it to show leadership for the greater cause of quote-unquote humanity, especially when we're facing an era of artificial intelligence and the physical body in terms of a human with 100% human DNA being replaced with artificial bodies, whether you want to call them a robot, a robotoid, an android, a hybrid, clones, skinwalkers, shapeshifters, whatever, to depopulate the planet so that only a select few can, I suppose, live. Anyway.
Right.
Nope, I'm using Sassafy to go.
Oh, of course. Of course. Always got those ads. This is YouTube. Where are we? Are we still on the ad? Hold on a minute. Okay, so now keep in mind there's that UNDRIP, United Nations Declarations of Indigenous Rights, that is reshaping the province of British Columbia, Canada, and the politics around it, as well as right across Canada. Okay? Currently, the Indigenous population within Canada is at about 5% within the total population. It used to be 3%, but the last time I checked up on it, it was quoted at 5%. So, give or take, right? Which is not a large percentage of individuals to take over the country and rewrite either history or how we operate as a society, to which at some point will directly affect subgroups within the society through those various doctrines within organized religion, where wealth building has allowed some groups to prosper while others do not. It all boils down to that supply and demand. So, you know, being that this is the downtown east side, what I'm trying to say is that a lot of the population down there are of native origin, who are impoverished due through years of oppression, institutional oppression, but also self-induced oppression, because ultimately people do have to take responsibility for their own behaviors. Okay. But there are a lot of negative influences in society with the handlers that keep people oppressed. And isn't that what Punjabis fight against when they wear their orange and blue turbans? Against oppression? Is it just for themselves being oppressed? Or is it for the greater collective? in the society that they live in, whether they're a majority with the block vote that can lobby a government for the benefit of what they want, because they're not lobbying the government for the benefit of what people in general need. And that's the gap. That's the vacuum. That's the problem. If I was to go and approach the temple, the Punjabi temple, go back knocking on that room with those gurus in there with their long white beards and beady eyes, and ask them to help me to correct the wrongs in society where housing is established as a right and not as a privilege, where people are not subject to being exploited and used and abused and assaulted until there's nothing left except body parts to be sold on the black market. Do you honestly think they would help me any more than what they were going to help me with anything that I worked on when Iqbal Wally took me to that room in those days when he was alive, holding my paperwork, telling those dudes to listen to what I had to say and to help? If they would have helped, we wouldn't have this housing crisis that we have. If they would have helped me with the foundation that I presented them with in terms of opportunities, yada yada, back in those days, honestly, I don't think we'd have the housing crises and the corruptions that we have in society today. But they refused to help. That wasn't the agenda. So why would they help me today when they see me as the scourge and my family as the scourge, and would expect for me to end up out on the streets on the downtown east side just so they could justify raising the rent where I live within the clique of the larger clique can continue to prosper, where my family becomes less and less and less? Would they sacrifice Mr. Gill, who is a part of my family, who is in the basement with me when I'm down there working with Uncle John, Auntie Shimei, Sierra, and now Mr. Gill down there with us? Are they going to sacrifice Mr. Gill too, just so they can continue to amass great wealth for themselves, ignoring what's going on in the parliament buildings when it comes to that UN Declaration of Indigenous Rights, hoping that it won't affect them and interfere with their wealth building tactics? Are they just going to pretend that it doesn't exist and hope that all the natives die off to solve the problem? Keep them out on the streets, and anybody else that ends up out there that are not like them? Did Mr. Gill write about that in his poetry? Did he have any solutions about that in his poetry? Was he a visionary? Or was he an Edgar Casey who predicted what's coming? Is it good? Is it bad? What's coming? Right? Where's the guidance? Is there guidance? Or is it just a fluffy this and a fluffy that and just all fluffy, fluffy, fluffy? Maybe touch briefly on a serious subject, but fluff it over with just a bunch of fluff. Right? To be passive aggressive versus a true warrior.
So I live here. Lived in Vancouver since the 80s.
Yeah.
Have 3 Pitney and a whole bunch of adopted children. So feeding people, doing outreach, sharing resources, holding government systems.
That is it.
We've been working together, protecting the vulnerable,
That
pointing
is-
out the hypocrisy and the aristocracy, keeping everybody safe.
What do you think since they make the drugs illegal again? What do you think for what's going to happen to the homeless people around it?
So I guess in this situation, they've made drugs, well, he used the word illegal, right? Because at one point, they brought in the safe injection site where people could buy pharmaceutical heroin or whatever that was clean and not laced with any other drugs like fentanyl and horse tranquilizers, which is out on the streets now, which is really hard on people's bodies and killing them and brings a lot of suffering. So for whatever reason, they revoked that pilot project. I don't know. Or did they make it where, you know how they decriminalize an X amount of drugs on your persons? So if you had a, I don't know, gram of something where it was for personal use, you wouldn't get charged? Is that what they're talking about? Like, I don't know what's illegal here, but anyway, something became illegal as of late.
Well, FIFA's coming, right?
So I think what she's saying is something is coming. I think it's the CCP, the Chinese Communist Party, having some little heyday in the downtown area. I'm not sure. This is what I'm thinking. I'd have to try and figure that out. But something is coming where the provincial government, probably in partnership with the federal government, wants to flush out the homeless people, which wouldn't be unusual because that's what they did with the Winter Olympic Games, right?
So they'll probably bust them out to Chilliwack or something, put them in a...
Yeah, they're going to, at some point in the next, I don't know how long it's going to be, they're going to be busting out all the homeless people out of the downtown east side area for the most part, right? Because somebody's coming to town, some dignitary, some leader of some country, which I'm thinking China, honestly, and they want to impress them. Kind of like what's going on in California. That's what they're doing in California too.
Trailer park for a couple weeks and put all the rents up. So
yeah, so they're going to bust everybody out that are living in whatever they're living in, paying through their noses, and bust them out to Chilliwack, put them God knows where. But when the people want to move back, they can't, because whatever they got kicked out of would have been evicted. So it would have been renovated to one degree or another to jack up the rents for the dignitaries that are coming in for this little hoo-ha that's going to be happening downtown at some point, right? And they're not going to be able to afford it.
they can't come back.
Do you think it's a good thing or a bad thing, making it illegal?
I'll tell you, pharmaceuticals are rare. They go to the Amazon, tear down the botanicals, and make synthetics to replicate the real. So Sister in Africa has got all she needs in her backyard, but they spray it and chop it down. Tampon in African is cotton.
You got it, though.
We don't need some sprayed cotton synthetic shit in our yannis. We don't need poison in our water, in our food, in our air. So I've been here for the Olympics, for Expo. They're going to put in more cameras, more parking stalls.
Yeah, some dignitary is coming. Mm-hmm.
They're going to have snipers on the roof.
We've seen them from my rooftop.
What, snipers?
Snipers!
Yeah, they've had snipers down
Two
there a lot.
snipers and soldiers in Kevlar. And we're calling out the Communist Party.
Yeah, they're calling out the Communist Party.
Who are doing the training
You got the videos?
They had 5,000 Chinese up in the interior doing their military training, and I guess now they're doing military training in the heart of Vancouver, with the Chinese having their own police force where they have their symbolism with their 5 stars or whatever the hell it is right there on the building to signify that it's owned by the the Chinese Communist Party, and ain't nobody can F with them because they've squatted on the land and laid claim to it. So I'm wondering how United Nations declarations of indigenous rights is going to interact with those politics, never mind with the mass wealth building of Punjabis. A Punjabi community is a gated community in British Columbia, Canada, where 98% of the people that live in that gated community are Punjabi and somewhat wealthy to one degree or another, have multiple assets, yada yada yada. Now, have the natives, I don't care what group, what tribe, what band, have they laid claim to the land that those houses are built on? Because they cannot lay claim on the quote-unquote monster home, but they can lay claim on the land that the monster home was built on. What is the backup plan for the Punjabis when that time hits the fan, where whole swaths, in other words, block after block after block within a gated Punjabi community has a claim on it from a band of natives where there's only maybe 14 within that tribe that lay claim? How do they plan on dealing with that problem? Fight in court for 15 years? And to what end goal? Well, you've got the Chinese infiltrated in other parts of British Columbia, Canada, where they've laid claim to land, where they say, no, that's it, it's our land, we've squatted, you ain't getting it back, to hell with you, it's going to be a war. Are the Chinese, are the natives going to lay claim to those areas? And how are the Chinese going to react to it? That's why I'm bringing up that, just to, did Mr. Gill write anything about that in his poetry? Did he have any visions around that? Did he have any predictions around that? Did he have any advice around that? What, everybody's going to run back to India with their tails between their legs as the food is running out because farmers can't plant the fields because they don't have the industrial fertilizers because everything's locked up in a boat at sea, or the boat gets blown up? Like, come on, people.
Right there, bro.
One there?
Yeah, from my roof.
Is that you live there?
Yeah.
So, is sniper all up there? They put sniper up there?
Other side, the white building on the corner, right? Yeah. 2 snipers and 2 guys in full-on camo artillery.
Okay, so I know the Punjabis are saying, well, this doesn't affect us. Separate lives, everybody's got to take responsibility, blah. It's the government's responsibility to look after these people that are being flushed out of their houses, even though it's the poorest of the poor, renting a room in decrepit buildings with bed bugs and all this other crap. But the point is, at least it's the roof over their head. And once they get, what, are they going to be moved off to Chilliwack and put into freaking modules? And for how long? Because they won't be able to go back. You already heard it. Is whatever they're going to, whoever they're kicking out of the next generation of single occupancy rooms in the various remaining hotels or whatever these buildings are, they're not going to be allowed back. They weren't allowed back after the Olympic Games. It was a culling. So now they're culling it again for a oversee dignitary that is problematic.
So that's
Why is that?
Introduced you so they can keep eyes on us.
Keep eyes on us. One time me and my friend go to a park, somebody's throwing pebbles at our...
I said, what's up?
We had a park on the other side of the street.
It's not staying right.
And we're calling them out.
That's one
We're like, they're communists, stop stealing our children. We're at Crop Park, we can hear the women.
Okay, this is what I wanted you to hear. They're sitting in a park, whatever. They can hear the women. And I believe this, people. I do. Okay? I think it's happening in Surrey as well. Yeah. This is how people deal with the do-gooders, the uppity-ups, the ones with money, the ones that are either borderline psychopaths or straight-up freaking psychopaths or whatever. They don't care if people are being kidnapped, murdered, harvested illegally, because I guess it just gives them more opportunity to, I don't know.
In the containers.
We are people in the containers.
We hear women in containers.
People in the containers, and they put people in the containers.
Abducting people.
They are abducting people. People are crying out, help, help, screaming, yeah.
It's not a lie. There's footage
Sit there at night and
kicking at the back of the truck.
People in trucks kicking, trying to get out, and they can't get out. Where's the government? Plotting and scheming how to send more of them away into a different district so they can be scattered even more and separated so that they lose that safety net with like knowing each other and speaking up and protecting each other, right?
So that
trafficking is real, and this is our...
There are subfloors in these heritage buildings where they take women. They'll trap them. They'll give them drugs.
so let's say like human trafficking sort of thing there.
Oh, yeah.
Is that happening a lot around
Keep
there?
them on their back and sedated and high. One of our dear friends who used to be a nurse, grew up down here, from here. Two of my friends caught this guy in the back alley.
Like, they need it.
Assaulting her, and she was already dead.
What?
This teacher in a wheelchair, she's all blue, like, oh, Elizabeth, what happened? She goes, Brandy, 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 Brandy. Already dead.
So what? Is this a government problem to which a government doesn't and shows no interest in solving the problem? If anything, they cater to the problem because they cater to dignitaries from places where these problems originate from, right? That guy across the street, when they had that federal SWAT come in, I'm telling you people, that vehicle, that white vehicle, after it was all said and done and they blew out Debbie's house, they went in there, they scooped him up, they threw him in that white vehicle, which is the exact kind of vehicle that in China they use as execution vehicles or crematory vehicles. They're made specifically to hold a body on a gurney quite comfortably. They do not look like your standard ambulance. Okay? They hauled his ass out of there after they blew out Debbie's house with their smoke bombs, tear gas, everything that they did, and they just rolled on down the street as if nothing happened, and then they put the rumor out after the fact, 3 weeks later, that nobody knew where he was. The cops didn't know where he was, the wife didn't know where he was, the home property owner didn't know where, everybody said he ran away and hid in a bush and just disappeared, which is a bunch of crock. I got it on camera. No. He was knocked out, dragged out, and then hauled off for some governmental science experiment to build on their super soldiers, or his body parts were harvested and sold on the black market, or he was put together as an android with spare body parts. And if he had nice teeth, you know they took the teeth for that purpose and probably recycled the nails because the more they can make their robotoids look human with real human body parts, the easier it is to fool the naked eye. Are the Punjabis up in arms and fighting against that? Speaking out against that? Do they feel that it will never happen to them because they live in a well-insulated, wealthy, gated community that protects them from all wars within Canada, whether it's overseas at that strait where ships can't cross to deliver fertilizer, or whether it's so that the farmers will not have what they need in order to fertilize the ground to plant in their own country of India, because it directly affects India, that's for sure. 50% of the farmers, if this continues on with what's going on with, I guess, Israel, United States, and what is it, Iran? It's not Iraq, it's Iran, right? 50% of India and their farmers are going to be affected by this if it goes on for any length of time, where the farmers won't be able to get fertilizer to feed the general population within the country of India. Never mind exports. Okay? And that's right across the board, right across the globe. So that's one fight. That's a war, right? Are the Punjabis going to stand up against that? How do they plan on protecting their gated community? How are they going to protect their grandkids, great-grandkids, brothers and sisters, mothers and fathers, wives, husbands, brothers, and so on? How do they plan on feeding their families as a gated community when the world around them is falling apart? As the natives are coming in 14 at a time through their bands, saying that's it. You own the house, but you don't own the land. We do, and they're either going to want it back and kick out all the Punjabis from those gated communities, or they're going to start making the Punjabis start paying a surtax just to rent the land, even though they own the house. Right? That's another different kind of war. Did Mr. Gill write about that? Did he have any predictions? Is he an Edgar Casey? Did he see what's coming? Was he a visionary to show what, leadership in terms of how to combat those issues on a diplomatic level without actually taking it to war? Because it's a psychological war for sure, right? Any more than what's going on here.
A retired officer told me he's dead.
Oh
because there's a street justice. There are people who in any other country would never see the light of day or would be executed.
So that was homeless people, or?
Homeless people, people with housing that's inadequate.
Marginalized people.
You're paying $900 for a rat-infested...
They're paying $900. Did you hear this? Okay, in these single occupancy rooms, $900 for a rat, mouse-infested,
bed-bug-infested...
bed bugs, cockroaches.
So what are you talking about? The kids as well?
And they're going to be evicted from these rooms to open up the building for a quick renovation that they're already renting out at $900 a room, so some foreign dignity can come in, spew a bunch of propaganda, cut a bunch of backroom deals, right? Stamp home this, stamp home that. And then when everybody leaves after visiting with their party, whatever that party is, those rents will go up to $1,500 to $1,800 per room. And the rats will move back in if they haven't even left. Cockroaches will still be there. Bed bugs will be there. And yada yada yada. Well, the homeless people are slowly but surely being kidnapped out on the streets, if not being murdered out in the streets, or murdered in housing where they're temporarily staying. As more people are being flushed out of their housing, families like mine, just because Mr. Gill died doesn't mean I'm safe. My family is safe. Doesn't mean that we'll be safe when we get to the next location, because ultimately the division of wealth is so lopsided and so insulated with that cover of do as we say, not as we do, because if you don't do as we say, we're going to expel you. And even if you try and leave and separate yourself from the doctrine that they're teaching you, they're still going to kidnap you, even in death, like they did with Mr. Gill, and took him to the temple after he told me, not even 6 weeks from predicting his death, that he didn't go to temples because he got tired of the politics through that organized religion. I'm not saying he didn't. He turned his back on his religion, but he chose to walk in his own shoes, and that's the point of the title of the video. When I was at the funeral, he had the audacity, he had the courage, he had the strength, he had the fortitude to walk in his own shoes, to forge a way, I guess through poetry mainly, and through the few interactions that he had while alive with certain individuals, where he made an impact to at least open up the discussion where people could problem solve, troubleshoot the larger issues, wars that are going on in our province, country, or globally, where humanity as a collective, a diverse collective, can survive. Because if you don't have diversity, it becomes incest. And if all you have is incest through generation after generation after generation, you get defective genes. It's good to have diversity.
Like,
Oh, absolutely.
like, how old is these kids you talking
We
about?
caught Buddy over there, brought a 14-year-old close to death, looking for kids that escaped from the playground. Know a woman who abducted.
Forcing me out of the house, putting Andre in great trauma, Amari at risk, or whatever. Because you have to remember, I went through the drama and trauma in 2003 by losing my house with Wally, which put Sierra at a greater risk of being exploited, with the handlers in the community that kept feeding her drugs, while the government and their workers didn't do anything to stop that, right along with the general community in general, didn't stop it, because Sierra became the sacrificial child to the collective of adults, so that they didn't have to address the problem. And that's why we have a high number of deaths relating to fentanyl and horse tranquilizer now. Yeah. as people get rich off that shit and build their gated communities and then play dumb. And then try to play themselves off as if somehow they're more superior and righteous, ethical, morally correct, and deserving of all the privileges while everybody else gets scraps. Did Mr. Gill write about that in his poetry? I don't know.
The two kids from Rakeham to take them to a trap house downtown. Near Prison Park, these two little native girls, 6, 7 years old, on their own.
Oh my
I
God.
go, come with me right now. I'm ready, see.
The Penticton farm, that was the VPD and the fire department and the Hells Angels. It wasn't one man, it was a whole group. They kept cutting.
That's what happened to Sierra, people. That body dude guy rolling up in his white van with that masochist bracelet on with the studs and his taser in his hand. Coming up the stairs, going inside, coming back out with that baby-faced cop guarding the door with Marcane, Tisha, and me outside on the porch in the rain as the baby-faced cop, 6'7", saying to that body dude guy, the one that came to pick up Sierra's dead body, supposedly with a taser in his hand and a masochist bracelet on him, right? Asking that guy, did you get the stuff? Or was it, did you get the cell phone? Are you coming back? Well, he didn't get the body, so clearly he has to come back. It was a whole lot of shenanigans, people, and the police were involved. Why doesn't the government do something about that? Instead of cover it up in court, in a legitimate court. Why doesn't the Punjabi do something about that, instead of acting like it doesn't happen? And if it does happen, somehow my family deserved that to happen to us. In terms of Sierra made her bed, she was an addict, she didn't get no help out on the streets, they liked her out there being used and abused and all this other crap. She deserved what justifying it. Did Mr. Gill write about that in his poetry? Or was it all just fluff? Little birdies and flowers and soft clouds with happy faces on them. Is that what Mr. Gill wrote about? Just happy faces with little birds, little blue jays, and little flowers, happy little flowers with a little mountain in the back with a beautiful little stream. Is that what his poetry was about? Or did he actually talk about hardcore, uncomfortable subjects that need to be addressed? Because he believed in a superpower where all people should have the right to prosper, be safe, have security, and have their human rights needs met when it comes to quote-unquote affordable housing, food, clean water, right? Access to health care when needed. Will his words reach the larger gated Punjabi community? Or are the thugs going to come in and shut him down like they try and shut me down?
I mean, you're bringing the girls out.
They used to, if you saw a woman with a shaved head, they owed money for a couple.
That's what they did to Sierra when she was 15 years old. They shaved her head. One day she came home and she was bald as a damn... Well, she wasn't completely bald. They shaved it, like, on the upper part. I think they left a little bit in the back. Or maybe they shaved it all. I just know that they shaved her hair off. I don't know why they did it, but they did. Or they yanked it out, one or the other. She had no hair. 15 years old. The handler's out on the street. Cops didn't do a damn thing about it. And neither did the Punjabi community. Because Sierra was a trafficked child with the dope. Yeah. She was guaranteed money for the dope dealers, and not the petty dope dealers, but the ones that bring the drugs into the community. The ones that traffic the dead bodies as they're dying off, ending up in the hospital like Shimei, with the organs taken out, with one big cover-up. Why don't the Punjabis talk about that stuff? Well, normally they wouldn't, because they're the ones that are buying the organs, because they're the only ones that can afford it, except for maybe the rich Muslims, the rich Caucasians, and the rich Chinese. Only rich people can afford to buy organs. Everybody else is dog meat.
Being drugs, right?
But you would think with the doctrine that you're growing up with, that you would be a little more proactive. I don't know.
They would take them to the Piggy Palace for a party, never to be seen again. And the brother was down here. The woman who got loose. And the same problem that existed then exists now, because the same retired officer says there's no jurisdictional cooperation. If you get abducted from the downtown east side, which is VPD, to the North Shore, which is RCMP, if they don't have a joint task force, it sits. The deputy chief said, I won't invest any money in those whores.
Oh my.
No, because there's money in the dead bodies. They harvest anything and everything. And, like I said, Sierra was in a snuff movie. Babyface cop. To the body dude guy going out, did you get the stuff? Did you get the cell? Right, the guy looking in the cell phone as he's going down the stairs. What happened to the taser when you were coming up? Yeah, because she was in a snuff movie. That's why. Where's my government investigating that? And yeah, Sierra's organs, something was taken out, sold somewhere, and I do not believe that her body is in that casket that they put her in. No way. Sierra wasn't embalmed. She smelled like aged meat.
That's not opinionated, that's factuated.
Facts.
Facts.
Back doors, vans.
Stuff we're talking about.
Jurisdictional? Since when is murder, abduction, and rape jurisdictional? I
Nah.
don't care where they took you from. Help.
They took my daughter from the city of Surrey in the province of British Columbia, Canada. They lured her to her death. Well, Shimei was targeted long before she even met the people who were targeting her, somehow being manipulated through the handlers in the community to eventually kill my daughter, so that my daughter's organs became available on the black market for those that could afford to pay for them. And that's just a fact. And I still do to this day believe that Shimei's organs are in some Punjabis' more than one body. Her lungs, her heart, her kidneys, her liver, her teeth, I think, went into a robotoid. I think her skin was used for a robotoid. Her eyes were used for organ transplant. Anything viable. And somebody paid for that. I wonder if Dr. Barr was at Mr. Gill's funeral. Seriously.
Facts. What advice you got to give people who are watching this video?
Love conquers all.
Thank you,
There's no government, no weapon forged. I would rather die for something than stand for nothing. We come this far.
Hello.
No stopping us
God.
now.
Yes.
So, did Mr. Gill stand for something or for nothing?